What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we finally have our official patch notes for Season 3, the Season of the Construct, and man, they're looking pretty good. So a lot of this is just bug fixes and class change balances, but I will say that I'll be covering the Barbarian and the Druid class. Now, I am not as familiar with the Barbarian as the Druid, but I do plan on playing a Barbarian sometime during Season 3, but my main will always be a hardcore Druid. So I will go ahead and scroll through all of the other changes for the different classes, but I will primarily cover the Druid and the Barbarian. I'll also be streaming a little bit later to continue to finish up my Renown grind on my softcore Barbarian, so I'll be ready for Season 3 when it drops, so that way I can join you guys in softcore and go ahead and get those builds out to you as soon as possible. And spoiler alert, it looks like I'll probably be trying to make a Lightning Storm Druid and possibly a Shred Druid now that they've actually fixed the Blurred Beast aspect and everything is working as it is intended to, or so we think. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get right into the patch notes, guys. So scrolling down, the first thing we're going to tackle are some of these uniques, and these are uniques for all classes. So the first unique here is the Pain Gorger's Gauntlets, and this is a unique set of gloves. It says damaging enemies with a cast non-basic skill marks them for 3 seconds. When a basic skill first hits a marked enemy, the basic skill's damage is echoed to all marked enemies, dealing a multiplier of 100 to a 200% increased damage. So that sounds pretty significant, although it does sound like it might be a little bit awkward at first to get used to, but it does sound like something you might actually enjoy using, especially if you want to make a basic skill build. So for Druid, this might look like, you cast your Lightning Storm, mark up a bunch of enemies, and then you go in and hit them with a basic skill, say off of a Crone Staff, Stormclaw, and you deal a massive chunk of damage to all those enemies. So I think there is a possibility we can still have a pretty unique Stormclaw build here in Season 3, especially with these unique gloves. Now for the aspect of adaptability, this is a utility aspect. It says when you cast below 50% maximum resource, basic skills generate 3 of your primary resource once per cast. When you cast at or above 50% maximum resource, basic skills still 40 to 80% increased damage. So again, another utility aspect, and this looks like it's also going to buff your basic skills as it states. So again, for Druid, this might be pretty good for a Stormclaw build. So maybe you won't be attacking as fast in Season 3 as we did in Season 2 with Stormclaw Druid, but this sounds like we're going to be getting some pretty big hits off of our Stormclaw if we decide to go that route. And honestly, when I read these, I might actually go ahead and make a Stormclaw Druid. Then we have the Juggernaut's aspect. This is a defensive aspect. It says gain 0.75 to 1.25 armor, but your evade has a 100% increased cooldown. So this actually sounds pretty good. A nice big chunk of armor here, and only at the cost of increasing the cooldown for your evade. And if you're a person who really utilizes your evades correctly and doesn't just spam them out constantly, I think you'll get a lot of survivability from this specific aspect, and this might be a nice replacement for the aspect of disobedience. Now we see for item updates, we have the Ring of Starless Skies. It says the unique power has been changed. Previous, casting a core skill reduces resource cost of your core skills by 12%, up to a maximum of 40%, but then it would reset upon using a non-core skill. The new way it functions is spending resources reduces your resource costs and increases your damage by a multiplier, a 10% multiplier for 3 seconds, up to a 40% multiplier. So pretty massive buff here for the Ring of Starless Skies. So we still get that reduction in resource costs, but we're also getting a big chunk of multiplicative damage. So that's pretty good. And then the offensive aspect of the expectant damage bonus now has a 5-second duration to be used. So you get a little bit of something for that aspect. Then for the Melted Heart of Sleek, this is one of the more popular Uber Uniques, and that's because it was basically pretty much broken for Season 2. They actually had to go back and actually fix this for PvP because it would make people unkillable. And it seems like they did a pretty good job here kind of correcting it, making it still worthy of a damage reduction source, but also adding some nice damage modifiers here. So all stats increase to 2 times normal value. That's really nice. All stats are phenomenal for the game. Core skill damage changed to movement speed. Now, some people might not like this. I personally love this because now I might actually use this amulet. I'm a big fan of movement speed across the board, so having movement speed on my amulets is almost always a must, and to see it being put into the Melted Heart will make this much more viable for a player like me. And then damage while healthy increased to 3 times the normal value. So they're making up some of that damage from your core skills, but the only conditional is you have to be healthy. So that's a nice change there. And then the unique power changed. Previous gained 30 maximum resource. In addition, when you take damage, drain 3 resource for every 1% of life you would have lost instead. And now it's going to be gain a bigger chunk of maximum resource. So you get 60 maximum resource. And then it says 75% of incoming damage drains 2 resource for every 1% of life you would have lost instead. So no longer are you going to be getting that damage mitigation for the entire amount of damage coming into your character, but 75% is pretty substantial still. So you should probably still see a nice big bump in your survivability when you get this uber unique, and you'll also see that increase to your overall damage and some movement speed. You can't go wrong with that. So I think it is a much better version of itself than it was in Season 2, and we'll see what happens when players pick it up in the game. Then for Overpower, we definitely seen this coming. They already said in the campfire chat they were going to be nerfing Overpower a lot here. And it seems like they went ahead and did that because, well, Overpower was overpowered. So Overpower attacks now gain plus 1% damage down from plus 2% per 1% of your base life you have in Fortify. And they did the same thing for your base life. So Overpower attacks now grant plus 1% down from plus 2% per 1% of your base life that you have in bonus life above your base life. So you see there basically a 50% nerf to Overpower, and that's really going to affect a lot of builds. Now, obviously, this is going to hit Hoda Barbs pretty significantly, and probably some pulverized Druids too, which really weren't necessarily that overpowered compared to Hoda Barbs for Season 2. But I still think Hoda Barbs will still be viable. They just probably won't be hitting billions of damage, which honestly is perfectly fine because I highly suspect that within maybe the first 1 or 2 weeks, we will see a Hoda Barb one-shotting Uber Duriel all over again. That's just how overpowered Overpower was with the Hoda Barb. Now for Barbarian, and like I said, guys, I'm not as familiar with Barbarian as I am Druid, so I will probably just give a base level opinion on this because I still have a lot to learn about Barbarian in Season 3. So for the new items, we have the Ring of the Ravenous. It says Rin's duration is increased by 2 to 4 seconds. Damaging enemies with brawling skills applies 2 stacks of Rin's Bleed. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds per enemy. I'm not familiar with the Rend or Rend build, so it sounds like something that might be pretty decent, but again, there could be other options out there that would make this ring pretty much useless. Aspect of Sundered Ground offensive, it says every 25 seconds upheaval is guaranteed to overpower and deals 10 to 20% increased damage. This timer is reduced by 4 seconds when upheaval overpowers a boss or an elite enemy. So that's kind of nice there at the end. You get a little overpower for your upheaval, and then you also get a timer reduction here of 4 seconds when you're using this on a boss or an elite enemy. So it makes it nice for doing bossing and stuff like that. Then skills. Now this is the big one because as soon as I seen this, I absolutely wanted to make a charge build for a Barbarian this season. And that's because my 2 favorite builds in Diablo 3 were obviously Whirlwind Barb would be the top #1, and then the Charged Zerking Barb was my second favorite build. So I was happy to see this, and I'm actually looking forward to getting my hands on this. So it says for charge, base damage increased by 900% from 0.25 to 2.5. Enhanced charge, terrain impact damage increased by 150% from 0.6 to 1.5. And then power charge no longer requires a terrain impact to reduce the cooldown of charge. And now charging a boss will reduce the cooldown by 6 seconds. So this is something I really wish they would do with a lot of skills, and I'm happy they added it to charge. And that's giving it a unique effect for bosses, so that way it's still good and works well on bossing. And I think that's going to make this charge and charge builds for Barbarian in Season 3 much more viable throughout all of the content. So definitely a really nice addition here, giving you that added cooldown when you hit bosses with charge. Then it says leap, the base damage was increased by 30%, which is nice. Passive, brute force overpower damage decreased from 15 to 8% per rank. Again, we've probably seen that coming. Walking Arsenal, duration of each weapon bonus increased from 8 to 10 seconds. Additional damage from having all bonuses increased from 15 to 20%. And having all bonuses now also increases attack speed by 20%. So a big upgrade for Walking Arsenal. Now, again, I'm not exactly sure how that fits into Barbarian, but maybe you guys know, so you can leave your opinions down in the comment section. Then for Unconstrained, Berserking damage bonus increased from 60 to a whopping 100%. That's pretty insane. Gushing Wounds bonus bleed amount increased from 115 to 140. Overpower Explosion damage increased from 70 to 85%. So again, like they said, they just want to bring up all those key passives and make them a lot better across the board for Barbarian, while bringing some of the more overtuned passives down. Then weapon expertise leveling has been cut by 50%. So that's really nice. That way players can level up all those weapon expertise much faster. And I think that's really nice quality of life change there. Then for your Paragon board, and I think this is a big change because I know pretty much all of the Barbarian builds I've heard run all shouts. So this is a change to the Marshal's Glyph. It says now reduces the cooldown for every non-shout skill by 4 seconds instead of every other shout skill by 1.2 seconds. So you're probably not going to be able to spam your shouts as much as you did in Season 2, unfortunately. However, it does seem like the skills overall are staying pretty much the same. Then for item updates, resource aspect of Echoing Fury, you now generate 6 to 10 Fury per second, while any shout skill is active instead of 2 to 4 Fury per second for any shout skill that's active. Obviously, you're going to have a much more difficult time spamming your shouts, so you're still going to get that Fury generation if you so choose to use this aspect. Offensive aspect of Limitless Rage, damage bonus now has a 5-second duration to be used. Then it says for Veterans Brawler offensive aspect, reduced bonus damage per stack from 15 to 20% down to 6 to 8%, and then reduced the maximum bonus from 225% to a possible 300% down to 30 to 40%. So pretty massive nerf there. Again, I'm not exactly sure what people use this aspect for. I'm sure it must have been pretty usable across the board to receive such a massive nerf. Then for the offensive aspect of Ancestral Charge, reduce the bonus damage from 75 to 120% down to 20 to 30%. And obviously they did that because they massively buffed the overall damage of Charge. And this would probably make it insanely overpowered if they left it like this. Offensive aspect of Encroaching Wrath, reduced bonus weapon mastery damage from 82 to 100% down to 40 to 60%, and damage bonus now has a 5-second duration to be used. And then the Ring of the Red Fuhrer, damage bonus now has a 5-second duration to be used. So big nerfs coming to some of these aspects, but they did buff up some, and obviously I am looking forward to that Charge build. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Again, like I said, I'm not as familiar with Barbarian, but I will be much better with Barbarian by the end of Season 3. Then for my main class, my Druid class, and I have read through these already, and I will say that I am a bit underwhelmed by some of the changes they've made, and I was actually hoping for a lot more, and I will preface this by saying this is exactly why I don't like promoting bugged builds, because then a lot of other things with Druid get overlooked. So obviously people were using the Poison Shred build and doing billions of damage, I think even trillions of damage, and you know, that probably made the developers overlook a lot of the weaker spots for the Druid class, because honestly, the class as a whole is pretty weak compared to a lot of the other classes, and unfortunately there was just one broken build that was doing so much damage. So I do think that we will see more buffs for this class going into the mid-season, but let's go ahead and look through some of these changes. So for the very first new item here, this is the Unsung Ascetic Wraps that everyone is talking about, and this is looking pretty nice. So it says Lightning Storm now gains 1 additional strike each time it grows, and Lightning Storm Critical Strike causes lightning to strike twice, dealing 10 to 20% increased damage. So this actually sounds like a must-have for Lightning Storm builds, and it does seem like your overall build going into Season 3 will be much the same as Season 2, using the Shepherd's aspect as well as the aspect of the Stampede to boost up your multiplicative damage through your companions. However, I will say this, there is still the bug that exists for channeling skills that if you get CC'd crowd controlled while channeling your skill, you will at times get locked out of completely moving your character or even casting your core skills. So that is something that I hope they address, and I honestly did not see that being fixed here in these patch notes. And I do remember them saying they fixed it previously, but I know for a fact that bug still exists because I've played Lightning Storm Druid just to level my Druids in general, and I also play a Whirlwind Barb right now on the softcore realm, and yeah, still functions the same way with your channeling skills, where when you get crowd controlled, sometimes you'll get completely locked out of moving and you cannot cast your core skills. So until they fix that, I will still make a Lightning Storm build, but I may not make a Lightning Storm build for hardcore, because not being able to move and not being able to cast your core skills in hardcore will pretty much mean that you're going to die at some point in time, and it's only a matter of when, not really a matter of if. Then for the utility aspect, this is the virulent aspect. It says when rabies infects an enemy, reduces its cooldown by 0.3 to 0.6 seconds. This cooldown reduction is tripled when infecting elites. And again, I really love these when they go ahead and add something like this, that the effect will work on elites. So elites are also bosses. So this is going to make rabies viable for spamming, possibly spamming with bosses as well. So making the overall skill a lot better in general. So this is a nice utility aspect, and I would go ahead and say that there is a possibility that players will be making some kind of rabies build here in Season 3. For the skills, enhanced rabies, maximum damage bonus increase from 30 to 60%. So again, another buff to rabies. I wonder how many buffs they're going to have to make to this skill before it actually becomes useful. Hopefully Season 3 will see that skill becoming very useful. Then lacerate cooldown reduced from 45 to 35 seconds. I'm not necessarily sure that's going to make that ultimate skill any more usable than what it is currently. Prime Lacerate changed functionality. Lacerate hits heal for 3% max life, increased to 6% on critical strikes. Again, pretty meaningless in my opinion. I don't really see that being the ultimate skill for most players. Then Cataclysm, they went ahead and buffed this again. Twister damage increased from 23 to 46%. Lightning damage increased from 77 to 95%. I don't know if this is going to make Cataclysm better than Petrify, because Petrify is just so powerful. And if you're not using Petrify, you're probably using Grizzly Rage. So I still don't know if Lacerate or Cataclysm will be very useful for the Druid class. Then for Supreme Cataclysm, vulnerable duration increased from 3 to 6 seconds. Again, I don't really think that adds that much value to this ultimate skill. Passives, Mending, additional healing received increased from 5 to 6% per rank. I don't even know if anybody uses this, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Go ahead and post that in the comments section. I know I never really touched this. I don't really see any reason why I would. Then for Thick Hide, Fortify gained increased from 6.4% to 10% per rank. That sounds pretty good. Unrestrained control impairing effect duration reduction increased from 3 to 5% per rank. Increased benefit while over 50% fortify reduced from triple to doubled. Not a big fan of that. I wish they would have left it like it is, but I am happy that they went ahead and increased the overall duration reduction to 5%, and that's going to make this pretty much equal out to the same. Before, you would end up with 27%, now you're going to end up with 30%. So not a big difference here if you're over 50% fortify, but if you're not, you're going to see a big difference with the base amount of effect duration reduction. Natural Fortify gained on shapeshifting increased from 1.4% to 2% per rank, not a big deal. Bestial Rampage required shapeshift duration reduced from 2.5 to 2 seconds. Attack speed bonus increased from 25 to 30%. I still think that this key passive is absolute trash, and the fact that this is the only key passive they buffed makes me pretty sad. I feel like there were quite a few key passives that they could have done something with, but it is what it is. Bestial Rampage, not going to use it. You know, I'm probably going to stick to my Nature's Fury anyway. So hopefully they'll do some changes in the future with the Druid key passives. I really don't think this is enough, and Bestial Rampage is absolute trash in my opinion. For our Spirit Boons, Prickle Skin, Thorns increased from 0.15 to 0.6, from 1,194 to 4,776. I haven't made a Thorns build with Druid, and I probably still won't make a Thorns build with Druid. Gift of the Stag, maximum spirit increased from 10 to 20. I still won't pick that. Avian Wrath, now this is a really nice change. It says critical strike damage bonus is now multiplicative instead of additive. So this almost makes this a must-have for your Druid in terms of your boons. So I mean, a multiplicative damage bonus, this is basically like a second maxed out Envenom passive, and I don't know why you would pass up on that. Then for our Paragon, so Tectonic, bonus lucky hit chance increase from 15 to 20%. That is massive. 20% is massive, and that glyph was already really nice, and the fact they're adding 5% more lucky hit is really nice. Poise, barrier increase from 5% of maximum health to 15%, duration increase from 4 to 6 seconds. That's good. It definitely needed a buff to the barrier, so 15% is nice. Wilds, passive companion damage bonus increase from 80 to 120%. Now, again, I don't think this really does anything to make a companion build or a pure companion build viable. Unfortunately, I think this season people will still be using companions to buff up their core skills because it does have a pretty hefty multiplier with the Shepherd's aspect. So hopefully in the future, they'll continue to buff companions until they are viable. But again, I could eat my words, and in Season 3, companion builds could be pretty great. Depends on how our pet companion works with our companions and our companion skills. So definitely looking forward to the day I can make a pure companion build. However, like I said, I don't think Season 3 will be that season. Items update, again, aspect of Blurred Beast. You know, they went ahead and fixed this. It was double dipping, doing way too much damage. Previous, while dashing, Shred seeks out nearby poison enemies, instantly dealing 70 to 100% of the poisoning damage to them. Now they went ahead and changed it to, while dashing, Shred seeks out nearby poison enemies and deals 20 to 40% multiplicative damage to them. So a bit of a different way of adding the damage in. So that's probably what they had to do in order to stop it from interacting with your Paragon boards the way it was. Aspect of Metamorphic Stone, reducing the Boulder Spirit cost from 50 to 40. This was much needed. I actually said this in a video I just made for the aspects. I think it should actually drop down to 30. It's way too high. And honestly, even when you swap it over to a core skill, it still does terrible damage. So making it 50, it's crazy. That's like the same cost of a Tornado, and Tornado is way better at dealing damage than Boulder. However, this will make the Dolmen Stone Amulet much better, even though I still think they need to change the ranks of Wrath to ranks to Boulder, so that way the Metamorphic Stone aspect actually is that much better when you equipped it on your Druid. Aspect of the Unsatiated, spirit generation and bonus damage increase from 20 to 30 to 30 to 40%. Not too bad. And then aspect of retaliation is seeing a nerf here. I don't know why. It only affects your core skills. So it says bonus damage reduced from 20 to 40% down to 20 to 30%. So a 10% reduction in the multiplier there, but definitely still a viable aspect for making core skill builds. Then, like I said, I will probably scroll through these for you guys because, again, I have not played the Necromancer, Rogue, or the Sorcerer, so I'll go ahead and scroll through these nice and slow for you guys so you guys can look at them yourself if you choose to. Now going over the gameplay activities, so it says Hell Tides, we already knew this, Hell Tides will now be active every hour with only a 5-minute gap between them. Then it says players will be able to more consistently acquire Distilled Fear, and it's now been reworked how Distilled Fear is collected from Nightmare Dungeons. Then it has some information there about that. Then the Purified Sigil reward for completing a Nightmare Dungeon will now always grant a Sigil 1 tier greater than the Nightmare Dungeon just completed. Now for the items. Now this is a big one I'm really happy with because, oh my god, getting Scrolls of Escape in Hardcore was so annoying. They were the same color as any normal item. You basically passed them up. It was hard to tell and they would never appear in your stash. So a lot of good changes made to the Scroll of Escape. So it now says, now will populate in the lost item stash if the player missed one that was dropped. So pretty good there. Stack limit increased from 20 to 99. That's really nice. So that way we're not taking up more inventory slots there. there, and then appear as legendary, so they are harder to miss when dropped on the ground, which is nice because honestly, they are about as rare, if not rarer, than a lot of the uniques and uber uniques you get in the game sometimes. Well, at least it seemed like that because I probably passed up on so many because I couldn't tell if they dropped. Moving on from that, it says the chance for scattered prisms to drop when defeating an elite monster has been reduced. Scattered prisms can now be acquired from Legion event chests. The material cap has been increased from 99,999 to 999,999. Treasure goblins spawned while fighting Avarice now have the same loot potential as normally encountered treasure goblins. World Tier 3 and World Tier 4 world bosses' weekly caches can now drop unique items. The increased cap for item power on drops from world bosses has been adjusted. Previous plus 100 to min, plus 100 to max, to now plus 65 to min and plus 25 to max. Then it looks like they made some item power adjustments to the in-game bosses in Nightmare dungeons. So you see here at World Tier 4, we're getting an increased item power chance here. So for unique item power range is 850 to 925. And for rare and legendary range, it is 800 to 875 for Grigori. And then for the Beast in the Ice, it says unique item power range is 900 to 925, and rare/legendary range is 850 to 925. And then obviously Duriel remains unchanged. Everything always drops at 925. And then here we're seeing the Nightmare dungeon getting a buff up. So for monsters at level 100, legendary item power is now 845 to 925. And then your monsters at level 125, we're getting 910 to 925. And that should really help us farm out our 925 gear much faster. So a big change there, and that's really nice because that'll make doing your higher tier Nightmare dungeons much more valuable for getting the top end gear for your characters. And then right here at the bottom, the biggest change here, all monsters above level 144 or Nightmare Dungeon tier 90 plus now are guaranteed to drop 925 item power gear. So no longer will you have to spam Duriel to get your 925 gear. You'll now be able to spam high tier Nightmare Dungeons to get your top end gear here. So that's a massive change, and that's really nice. It was much needed to make high tier Nightmare Dungeons actually worth doing. Then there's some miscellaneous changes here. You guys can go ahead and read over those for yourself. I'm not really too interested in that. Then for the user interface and user experience, the biggest change here was the WASD keys. I personally use a controller, so I know that this is really beneficial for keyboard and mouse players. And I actually might go ahead and play with a keyboard and mouse every now and again, now that we can move using the WASD keys. Now for bug fixes, for gameplay, I will highlight that they did go ahead and fix an issue where the Echo of Lilith could still attack the player after being defeated during the second phase of the encounter. That actually almost got one of my hardcore characters killed. And you see here, they said they fixed an issue where various skills and effects such as Devouring Blaze did not consider staggered bosses as crowd controlled, so that's really nice. And then for the Barbarian, it says fixed an issue where the Bonebreaker Legendary Paragon node didn't have a buff indicator. Fixed an issue where the guaranteed overpower from the Earth Striker aspect could trigger on basic attacks. Fixed an issue where charge cast by Ancients spawned by the aspect of Ancestral Charge did not trigger explosions from the Brawler's aspect. So that's a nice fix there that'll make that even better. Then fixed an issue where Hammer of the Ancients was dealing more damage than intended due to the bonus from the Violent upgrade also being applied even if the Furious upgrade was chosen. So another bug fix that will negatively impact Hammer of the Ancients, but again, it was much needed. This specific core skill and all of the overpowered damage, and obviously this bug as well, was dealing insane amounts of damage and one-shotting everything with no issue. Then for Druid, it says, fixed an issue where the tooltip for Envenom displayed its bonus damage as additive when it was multiplicative. So nothing really changing there, just the way the tooltip is read. Fixed an issue where Enhanced Ravens wasn't increasing critical strike chance to enemies hit. That's really nice. I actually didn't know that was how it was functioning. I'm happy they actually fixed it, so now Ravens will be more valuable. Fixed an issue where the Direwolf's aspect did not specify that it also made Grizzly Rage function as a werewolf skill. That's nice as well. And then, like I said, I will scroll through the rest because I have not played those classes. And then we have here just some user interface stuff, quests and dungeons, and miscellaneous stuff they changed. But I'll let you guys go ahead and read that if you so choose to. But that's it for the video, guys. I'm still very excited for Season 3, if a little bit underwhelmed by the class changes to the Druid. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Do you think these are okay? Do you think they should have done more? Do you think there should have been more nerfs or more buffs? You know, whatever it is, throw your opinion down there and I will respond to it as soon as I see it. As I said in the beginning of the video, I will be streaming later on today. I just have some things to do before I can sit down and actually dedicate some time to streaming. And as always, I hope you guys are having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from. And peace out, guys. I will see you in the next one.